In this second portion of the event, we're going to discuss how connectivity has taken on a new urgency. We'll examine our increased reliance on technology and address socioeconomic barriers and that digital divide that just doesn't seem to go away. We're going to be joined by members of Congress, mayors and technologists, and AI experts. Before we get underway, there are a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at #TheHillWork. We're broadcasting live and taking your questions throughout the program. And I always laugh at this. If you experience any trouble with the live stream, refresh the page. Maybe it will fix it. Thank you so much. Our first guest is Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester from Delaware. She is co-chair of the new Democratic Coalition Future of Work Task Force. Congresswoman, great to see you today. You know, when I worked for Senator Jeff Bingaman in the 1990s, I helped draft a thing called Scrambling to Pay the Bills, the Senate High Wage Jobs Task Force report looking at workers in the IT economy. And, I just always, look at those workers and say, we're not giving them what they need. As you look at the future of work, what does your task force think we need to do to help workers, surf these currents?
Well, first of all, Steve, I want to say thank you to the Hill for even having such a session. It's such an important topic that we need to be discussing as a country. And the New Dems have focused on it. And I've also had the opportunity to start a first of its kind bipartisan Future of Work Task Force or Caucus in the Congress. And I think initially we all thought that, as you mentioned, this is not a new topic. We've been talking about the future of work for a while now. And we thought that maybe, it would be artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like that were automation that were going to push this conversation. But it's really been a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, that has really pushed distance learning, telework, telehealth even. And so, what we're hearing and what we're working on is looking at the impact that this pandemic has had, as we're also thinking about a North Star for where we should go as a country. I recently heard that since March, 100,000 small businesses have shut down and will be shut down permanently. And that overnight, we have seen changes in how we've adopted this new way of life. And so everything from e-commerce on how you shop, again, to how you get your health care. And so it's important for members of Congress to be looking at this comprehensively and together. And technology is going to be a key. It's one of the major tools that we knew before was a skill that people were going to require. But even now, more than ever, as we have now shop online, we now get our groceries online, we do so many different things. And it's important that Americans have the tools to be able to not only compete, but to live and to be healthy as well.
Representative Rochester, I usually dominate the question period, but there's we've been taking questions from the audience. I've got such a good question for you. Let's bring Anna in. Anna?
I'm Anna Fife with the Aspen Institute Future of Work Initiative in Washington, D.C. My question is for Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. Congresswoman, you founded and co-chair the Bipartisan Future of Work Caucus in the House. I'm curious, as you think about the rest of this Congress and next Congress, where you see areas of possible agreement to support greater stability and opportunity for workers with your colleagues in the House. Thank you.
I give that a strike. That's a strike.
It's a great question. And also to Al Fitzpaine and the team over at Aspen Institute, they are doing great work. I think again, back to the pandemic, we have seen that members of the Democratic and Republican Party have had to come together on major packages like the CARES Act, where we had to take a look at the fact that we now have many people that are working in a gig economy. And how can we expand unemployment insurance? That's social safety net to them. That was one area that we came together on. Another was paid time and sick leave. Again, these are part of a social contract that has existed for over 100 years, but we now have to together face it and deal with it. I think one of the biggest areas that we need to be able to come together on is a infrastructure package. I think, after the upcoming election, we're going to have to build back this economy and in a stronger and better way. And that's going to require us coming together as Democrats and Republicans and looking at how do we bridge that digital divide? How do we make sure that the infrastructure is not just our roads and bridges, but also broadband and access to the tools that individuals that are, whether they're in school or whether they're at work, are going to need to live, work, and play.
You know, this morning, a bit earlier today, we interviewed your colleague Susan Brooks, Representative Brooks from Indiana, and she gave one of the strongest statements about we need to end this digital divide. We need to hook every household in America. We need to get out and solve this problem. And she's on the Republican side of the aisle. What is inhibiting us from moving forward in finally dealing with issues like the digital divide and the lack of connectivity, both in cities but also urban areas that's out there?
Well, I mean, even as you were sharing, Susan Brooks and I both sit on Energy and Commerce together and have been. I think one of the things is people don't even realize some of the things that we have done together. Telehealth, like I mentioned, is a perfect example. The expansion of that from a 13% penetration to, I've heard, up to close to 90% penetration of an adaptation of it. And it was because we, as Democrats and Republicans, also looked at the rules that prohibited medical providers from even getting reimbursed. I think even when you look at some of the issues like in the rural areas of our country, there was a study done by the Joint Center that showed that 28% of white homeowners did not have broadband, and 46% of African Americans lacked home broadband. And what we need to know is that it's not a one size fits all, and that we do have to target and prioritize our resources, but it's incumbent upon us in Congress to pass bills like the major infrastructure bill that we passed in the House, and that we come together because it is a necessity. It's a necessity. And again, that's what I think we've seen earlier this year, is that we recognize the stakes are that high. I think it starts, though, with a common vision. And that's one of the reasons why the Future of Work Caucus that I started was so important to me, that it be bipartisan, because we have to first start out with the same level of information, the same vision for where we want to go. Sometimes we might want to get there in different ways, but it starts with that clear vision for where we're going together.
Representative Rochester, I really like how you balance both thinking about workers and workplace, but also, you don't run away from science and technology and, these other areas. I was doing some talks recently, and I sort of felt like we're in this time where we're on the edge of so many profound technological leaps across the board, from health, but just how we do everything, communications and so on. But yet if Galileo were resurrected today, he'd still be found guilty. So I'm just interested in that tension, and just to get your sense of the temperature inside the Congress about the need for investing in and promoting science while we're also looking at these other equities in the economy.
I really think it's interesting. I was part of a subcommittee hearing just now, and to hear my Republican colleague talk about the science, again, that was uplifting to me. I think the whole issue of climate change is a perfect example, and the fact that this presents opportunities for us in terms of jobs. The fact that if we look at this as an opportunity for us to build and manufacture and focus here at home, that presents, I think, a common ground opportunity. But that also ties to the skills that are needed for the workforce of the future. The pandemic has displaced many people. And so the ability for folks to, if you don't have access to broadband, even just learning and gaining those skills is going to be a challenge. And one of the other things that we've seen recently in a Future of Work event that we hosted is that even when people of color have the same skills, we still see inequities. So that's another major area that I think this time has shown us that as we look towards moving forward, we've got to look at the structures and the institutions that are created as well, and what kind of disparities are present there as well.
Just in closing, Representative, do you see any examples of upskilling or continuous education or refreshed training that impress you? Because again, this is another area we've kind of walked around and talked about for ages. But I sort of believe in show and tell. If you see something great, let's highlight it. But are you heartened by anything out there when it comes to not letting generational shifts lose important talent? Are we somehow going to get credentialing better than we've been getting it?
Well, I had the opportunity with on a bipartisan delegation to actually go to Germany and look at apprenticeship programs. We've had the opportunity to look at some of the exciting things that we're doing in Delaware as we prepare students in high school to be able to get into advanced manufacturing and some of the other skills. And I think in our country, we have some great examples, but especially right now, with this pandemic, and I don't want to name specific companies, but I have been hearing about this surge of organizations online that are able to provide short-term, quicker credential opportunities for individuals that they can do. This is, again, why the broadband internet and the ability to have the tools is so important for folks, but they're shorter-term credentials because people are going to need to be able to flex and change the kind of work that they do. I mean, we've seen through this pandemic that, restaurants are being very much challenged. People who used to rely on their businesses being a human touch thing are having to even build websites. And so I saw a quote from the Washington Post that from the e-commerce person at Square, and they said that they saw a 3-year adoption cycle get compressed to 3 weeks in terms of people scrambling to get their businesses online. So I think there's a lot of movement in terms of making sure that we can upskill. Even in the state of Delaware, we have now a coalition that has come together using CARES dollars to make sure that we are training people for on-demand jobs, not the jobs that that were from the past, but the skills that employers need for today. And so I think together, looking at how we use those CARES dollars in our local areas, how we look at the public-private partnerships to ensure that we have the skills to meet the demands of today and the future is really our goal.
Well, thank you. Representative Lisa Blunt, Rochester. Tell everybody, her Twitter feed is great. It's at RepLBR. I love that. I love people who have short Twitter handles. And who's co-chair of the Bipartisan Future of Work Caucus. Thank you so much for your work in this area and for sharing time with us today.
Thank you so much for focusing on this because the future of work is now.